Another question here. This is from a former guest on the Money Movement, Ronnie Phillips, Professor Emeritus of Economics at Colorado State University, someone who we had on the show to talk about the Chicago Plan, which was a plan put forward in the throes of the Great Depression from leading economists around really the idea of full reserve banking as opposed to fractional reserve banking and what that could mean. We talked about that in the context of stablecoins. We'll try and put a link into that episode here. Ronnie's question is, given the developments in technology and the increased competition from the private sector, do you think the Federal Reserve can and should play a smaller role in the payment system? It's a really good question. I think every part of the world is different. In China, for example, the government is very heavily involved in the development of core infrastructure. But even in China, there's intense cooperation between large private enterprises and the government. And there are, state-sponsored initiatives that depend upon work that government does and work that the private sector does in combination. And the recent digital currency effort, the DCEP out of China, is an example of that. When you look at the West, you look at the development of the Western economic system, especially post World War II, but certainly before as well. The private sector has played a much larger role in payment systems and payment system innovations. When you think about electronic money, the first real version of electronic money that we kind of all can relate to is the bank wire. And that bank wire system was really driven by a set of private sector players coming up with standards through an association. That association is known as SWIFT, for how to send these wire messages back and forth. And that organization was basically a membership-based organization of private financial institutions, but it worked really closely with central banks to ultimately get that to function well. When the next major electronic money innovation came along, say, Visa and MasterCard, but in the 70s and 80s, that was also a consortium of private sector actors who were creating technology for these magstripe cards and terminals and how to get that to kind of reconcile, using the underlying, settlement systems that the banks had in place, but improving upon it, building another layer of electronic money innovation on top of it. And again, there it was really a consortium of private sector actors. But of course, working in consultation with regulators, the regulators, including the Federal Reserve, the OCC at the Treasury Department, and others in different states who oversee the financial institutions that were innovating in this way. And I think that's what we're seeing now. We're continuing to see private sector-led innovation accelerating in this new type of electronic money, digital currency money, and moving at a very, very fast pace. And potentially a pace where within 3 to 5 years, as we talked about in another question, billions of people could be using this. It does not seem likely to me that the Federal Reserve is going to run at the same pace, and nor do I think it's really set up to be a technology innovation organization. I think the Fed has a really critical role in terms of R&D in this space, to really deeply evaluate the kinds of standards that the Fed would expect to have in place around security, around safety and soundness. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for collaboration, as we've seen historically in the development of other forms of electronic money. Collaboration between the Federal Reserve, the US Treasury Department, with the private sector to develop this next world of internet-based money and an economic system built on the internet.